r/ask Reddit. Everyone hates me until they need me. What jobs are the best example of this? Story 1. I've been a lawyer for a long time. Let me tell you about one of the worst jobs I ever did representing a client. He was a high school teacher. He also had a mild porn addiction. He surfed those websites where people traded passwords to subscription porn sites. Except one of those sites was a honey trap. Their only business was suing people who illegally hacked their site with stolen passwords that they put on these password trading sites themselves in order to trap people. The lawyers representing the site were the scummiest fucks I've ever had to deal with. They flat out wouldn't negotiate. Worse yet, my client had been identified through a John Doe IP tracing subpoena. He hadn't been named yet in the lawsuit, but they knew who he was. And if we didn't settle in time, they'd name him in this public filing, which would be professionally problematic for my married, family man, high school teacher client. In the end, we paid the extortion that they demanded. And I felt like absolute shit. I felt like I had never done a worse job representing any client, ever. And when the settlement agreement, with its confidentiality provision, was signed, and the ransom paid, I got the nicest, longest, most sincere thank you card and note I've ever seen. Which, actually, isn't much of a competition, because basically none of my clients have ever thanked me. Ever. But this one guy, for whom I did essentially nothing, and who was victimized by a dishonest company represented by dishonest and unethical lawyers, this man, my client, who was done wrong by our whole judicial system, he was grateful. Profusely grateful. Over my career, I've won hundreds of millions for my clients, and I've successfully defended them from billions of dollars in potential liability. But I only have one thank you card in my desk. From this guy. It's been in my desk for over a decade now, and it won't leave until I retire. The sincere thanks from the one person I helped the least. Postscript: another set of lawyers did a better job than I did defending their client in this case. They did such a good job that the court started asking questions of the plaintiff. And then the plaintiff's attorneys. And they lied, because they're liars. And the way that case ended was, all of the claims against every remaining defendant were dismissed, the president of the plaintiff went to prison for fraud, and the plaintiff's attorneys went to prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, and the two lead attorneys were disbarred. The day I read that, I called up the defense counsel who had led that charge, and we talked for 2 hours about the case. And then I went home, cracked open a bottle of champagne, and celebrated. The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind fine. Story 2. Woe to ANY corporate executive who is foolish enough to make any critical overhead department justify their budget and worth to the company. I hear this kind of nonsense all the time from executives. Why do we even need IT? We're a financial company. They need to justify their budgets. Not realizing IT is literally the backbone every system is built upon. I get this a lot in analytics. Executives always saying to justify the amount of money we invest in data and analytics, or we'll cut the budget, then they wind up underfunding things or going with the cheapest option. 6 months later, why can't I get a decent report? I don't trust these numbers. Why did it take 2 weeks for you to get me this data? Because you fired all the data engineers and architects and chose literally the cheapest, most unreliable platform you could get. Nobody ever asks why we need a legal department or HR or any other overhead function. Probably because executives need to run to legal every day. Story 3. Pharmacists. People get mad at the pharmacy for wait times. Most of the time, it's not even our fault. Prior authorization, refill requests, etc. are all between your healthcare provider and insurance. All we can do is wait, just like you. But we get caught in the crossfire and get the chewing out. On top of this, most pharmacy computer systems look like they are from the early 2000s, and the computers run like it, too. Most drug databases are online now, not printed in a book, so we need the computer to be able to check your drug, dose appropriateness, and drug interactions. This contributes to wait times as well and is not our fault at the pharmacy level either. Prescribers often chew the pharmacist as well. Some doctors act like they can't make an error. They take the attitude that they wrote it, and it's what the patient needs, so we should just fill it. Two issues with this: 1, the pharmacists don't work for you. 2, it's our license on the line just as much as yours if there is an error. We are not just going to take your word for it. This leads me to the part where people should love the pharmacist. We are checking to make sure the drug is safe, effective, and appropriate for you specifically. You would not believe how many errors we catch. I have seen doses prescribed off by a factor of 10 or 100 because of the metric system, enough to be lethal. I have seen them come in listed as 4 times higher than recommended because of the way the prescriber wrote the directions. I have seen drugs prescribed with direct interactions to the patient's current medication list, sometimes because the doctor didn't cancel the other agent, and sometimes because they weren't even aware those two drugs interacted. I have seen drugs prescribed in the exact same class of another drug the patient is allergic to or have the same chemical group they are allergic to. I have seen drugs prescribed with a coloring dye in it that the patient is allergic to and the provider either not know about the patient's allergy or not be aware the two drugs have the same dye. And that is not even counting the internal errors made in the pharmacy that we catch. The catch is, most people don't know the pharmacist is doing all of this. A lot of people think the pharmacist is just putting pills in a bottle and slapping a sticker on. That is, until we save you from an errant drug or dose as the patient, or we save you from losing your license and a lawsuit as a prescriber. In addition, the pharmacist is the drug expert on a healthcare team. When your health conditions and medication lists get extremely complicated, often it is a clinical pharmacist in the hospital that is actually the one sitting down, figuring out what to prescribe and dosing it, then having an MD sign off, and sending it to the actual pharmacy to recheck and fill. We can't diagnose you as well as an MD, but we can come up with a lot more creative solutions to fixing it once we know what is wrong. And often, with a lot less medications and side effects involved. You may not ever see us in the hospital or even know we exist, depending on our specialty and how the hospital operates, but we are there and figuring out the best possible drug treatment for you. Story 4. Housekeeping. People were such assholes to the housekeepers at the hotel I worked at. To them they were a bunch of foreigner scum, personal servants, and thieves. In reality those girls were the hardest workers I've met, and for little pay in return. They had a lot of integrity. They could find a diamond ring, and every single time when they could pocket it they are turning it into me so I can call its owner. If you accuse a housekeeper of stealing with no proof otherwise, you're an asshole. Years in the hotel industry and I've only ever seen one person steal. A manager. Story 5. I was an HR admin for a growing company. I was frustrated beyond belief with my boss. We had a few store openings coming up that were acquisitions of other companies, so basically I had to process all the new employee paperwork for several hundred new employees. These were flagship stores, communicated to investors as the future. Well, I quit at a point in this process, literally told the boss off and walked out. According to my friend coworker who remained, they were unable to get the stores open on time because of this. It crashed investor confidence, and the stock price, that had been climbing rapidly, stalled and later crashed, not taking credit for the crash, but I do believe I was the straw that broke the camel's back. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.